One family photo destroyed my wedding overnight. I still don't know why. I, 24M, met my fiancée, Christina, 23F, 2 years ago. It was one of those fate moments that you usually see in romantic movies. I was flying back to the Philippines to visit my mother's hometown and spend some quality time with my grandparents. I happened to be seated next to her. For 13 hours, we talked. We didn't even watch the in-flight movies. We talked about our childhoods, our favorite Filipino foods, our careers in the US, and our dreams. By the time we landed in Manila, I was done for. I fell in love with her somewhere over the Pacific Ocean. That flight was the start of what I thought was a perfect relationship. When we both got back to California, we realized we lived in different cities, but that didn't stop us. Christina is, for lack of a better word, the perfect partner. She's beautiful, incredibly caring, and she has this way of making me feel like the only person in the room. We had our disagreements, sure, but we never had those blow-up fights you hear about. We had a rule: we talk through everything before the day ends. We were a team. After a year of dating, I moved into her apartment. Since I work in IT/consulting, I can work from anywhere, and it made sense for me to be closer to her. Life was good. Better than good. I felt like I was building a future with my best friend. About 6 months ago, I decided I was going to propose. I'm a traditional guy, and I know how much her family means to her. Her parents still live in the Philippines but visit California every year. I called them up to ask for their blessing. I had met them several times by this point. I'd taken them out to dinner when they visited, and I talked to them on FaceTime almost every time Christina called home. They always seemed to like me. They called me Iho, son. When I asked for her hand, her mom, Stmil, started crying over the phone. She was so happy. But they had one condition: they wanted to handle every single wedding preparation and expense. They are well off, and Christina is their only daughter. They wanted to give her the grandest wedding possible, back in the Philippines or at a high-end venue in the States. I didn't care about the money or the prestige, I just wanted to marry Christina, so I agreed. I timed the actual proposal for their annual visit 2 months ago. I did it at a nice botanical garden. Her mom was sobbing with joy, and her dad gave me this big, approving pat on the back. It felt like we were one big family. Christina has always dreamed of a fall wedding. She loves the aesthetic of October, the colors, the crisp air. We set the date for this coming October. My parents, who live in Sedona, Arizona, own a beautiful boutique inn. It's a stunning property with red rock views, and they've spent years turning it into a premier spot for small events. As a wedding gift, my parents told us they would reserve the entire inn for 3 days for the wedding. No charge. This was a huge deal because it meant our friends and family could stay on-site, and it's a location that people pay thousands for. My mom has met Christina a few times when we went to Sedona for Christmas and Thanksgiving. My mom absolutely loves her. She always tells me I hit the jackpot with Christina. This brings us to 2 nights ago. We met her parents for dinner at a quiet, upscale Filipino restaurant in Orange County. Everything was normal. We were eating adobo and pancit, laughing about how much luggage her mom was going to bring for the wedding. Christina and I decided to tell them about the venue gift. We thought they'd be relieved. We have a surprise, I said. My parents are gifting us their inn in Sedona for the wedding. It's reserved for 3 days. You won't have to worry about the venue or the lodging for the wedding party. The table went quiet. It wasn't a happy, quiet. It was an uncertain, quiet. Her father looked at me and said, "You know, we've realized we still haven't met your parents. Traditionally, the groom's parents are supposed to be involved much earlier. Why have they stayed in Arizona this whole time?" I felt a bit defensive, but I kept my voice calm. I explained that my mother has been struggling with a pretty serious autoimmune condition. Long-distance travel is very hard on her, and even the drive from Sedona to Southern California can leave her bedridden for days. I told them that she felt terrible about not being there, but she was excited to meet them at the wedding. "I have a photo of them, though," I said. I pulled out my wallet and took out a family picture I took last Christmas. It's a clear shot of me standing between my mom and my dad in front of the fireplace at the inn. I handed the photo to Christina's mother. She looked at it for a second. Then she squinted. She pulled the photo closer to her face, her brow furrowing. She didn't say anything for a long time. Then, she leaned over and whispered to her husband in a very sharp, urgent tone in Tagalog, "Bakit parang kilala kayo siya?" Why does she look familiar? She was pointing directly at my mother's face. Her husband, my Phil, took the photo from her. I watched his face. Usually, he's a very stoic, poker face kind of guy. But as he looked at my mother's face in that photo, his expression shifted from curiosity to a deep, smoldering anger. I have never seen a man look so disgusted so quickly. It was like he was looking at a ghost or a criminal. He didn't ask a question. He didn't ask for clarification. He just handed the photo back to me like it was covered in something filthy. He stood up. The chair screeched against the floor. "There will be no more wedding," he said. His voice was low, trembling with rage. "Christina, we are leaving. Now." Christina was stunned. She was looking back and forth between her dad and me, stammering, "Dad, what are you talking about? What's wrong? It's just a photo." He didn't answer her. He just looked at her with this stern, uncompromising gaze and said, "If you are my daughter, you will come with us to the hotel. This engagement is over." Her mother was visibly shaking. She wouldn't even look at me. She just grabbed her purse and followed him. Christina was crying, apologizing to me, saying she had to go find out what was happening. She promised she would call me in an hour. That was 2 days ago. The first night, I stayed up until 4 a.m. Every time I called her, it went to voicemail. I sent dozens of texts. "Is everyone okay? Did I do something? Is it my mom? Do they know her? Please just talk to me." Yesterday morning, she finally sent a short text, "I'm at the hotel with them. My dad is. I've never seen him like this. He won't let me leave yet. I need to hear the whole story. I'll come home when I can. I love you." That was the last thing I heard. I spent all of yesterday pacing our apartment. I cleaned the kitchen 3 times just to have something to do with my hands. I talked to my best friend, who's also Filipino-American. He tried to rationalize it. He said, "Maybe your mom was the other woman in some old drama? Or maybe there was a huge land dispute back in the province. You know how our parents are with grudges. But my mom is the sweetest woman I know. She's been married to my dad for 26 years. She's a devout Catholic, she runs a business, she helps everyone. The idea of her being involved in something so toxic that it would ruin my life 30 years later seems impossible." This morning, I couldn't take it anymore. I drove to the hotel where her parents usually stay. I saw her car in the parking lot, which gave me a tiny bit of hope. I went to the front desk, but they wouldn't give me any information, obviously. I sat in the lobby for 3 hours hoping they'd walk through. They never did. Finally, I called my own mother. I hadn't wanted to tell her because I didn't want to stress her out and trigger a flare-up of her illness. "Mom," I said, my voice cracking. "I showed Christina's parents your picture at dinner. Her dad saw your face and canceled the wedding on the spot. He looked like he hated you. Mom, do you know a man named Phil's name?" The silence on the other end of the line was the scariest thing I've ever heard. It went on for so long I thought the call had dropped. Then, I heard a ragged, broken sob. My mother, who is usually the rock of our family, started crying hysterically. "I'm so sorry," she kept gasping. "Oh, no. Not you. Not my son. I thought it was all buried. I thought I was safe here." I kept asking her, "Safe from what? Mom, what happened?" She wouldn't tell me over the phone. She just kept saying she needed to talk to my father and that she'd call me back. That was 4 hours ago. So, I'm sitting in my car. My fiancée is essentially being held emotional hostage by her parents' trauma. My mother is falling apart in Arizona. My wedding is cancelled. And the worst part? I still don't actually know why. Was it a romantic betrayal? A crime? A family feud that goes back generations? In Filipino culture, family honor is everything. If my mom did something to shame them 30 years ago, they might actually expect me to pay for it by losing the woman I love. I feel like I'm in a nightmare. I'm staring at that photo in my wallet. My mom looks so innocent in it. But clearly, to Christina's father, she is a monster. Am I the a-hole for showing the photo? If I had just waited until the wedding day, would it have been too late for them to stop it? Or did I just save us from a lifetime of family war? I don't feel like I saved anything. I just feel empty. Update. I honestly didn't expect to be writing an update this soon, and definitely not like this. The last time I posted, I was sitting in my car outside that hotel feeling like my chest was collapsing in on itself. I stayed there longer than I should have. Long enough that the sun went down and the parking lot lights turned on one by one. At some point exhaustion replaced panic. I drove home because there was nothing else I could do without making things worse. The apartment felt wrong when I walked in. Quiet in a way that didn't feel peaceful, just unfinished. Her shoes were still by the door, her coffee mug still in the sink from the morning she left, her sweater hanging over the back of the chair. Everything looked normal except nothing actually was. I slept maybe 2 hours that night, mostly just lying there staring at the ceiling, replaying that dinner over and trying to figure out what detail I missed. The next day dragged. I checked my phone constantly even though I knew there were no new messages. Every notification made my heart jump anyway. Around noon I almost drove back to the hotel again but stopped myself because I didn't want to escalate things with her parents. I kept telling myself she would come home when she could. She finally did. My fiancée just got home a few hours ago, and I don't think I'll ever forget the way she looked when she walked through the door. Not dramatic crying, not angry, not even panicked. Just drained. Like someone who had aged years in a day. She dropped her bag by the couch and stood there for a second like she didn't know what to do next. The very first thing out of my mouth wasn't romantic or thoughtful. It was immediate survival instinct. Are we related? That was honestly my first question as soon as she walked in. My brain had gone to the worst possible conclusion after sitting alone with my thoughts for 2 days. She actually laughed. Not because anything was funny, but because the question caught her off guard. It was a short, tired laugh, the kind people make when tension finally cracks. No, she said. We're not related. I felt my entire body loosen in a way I can't really describe. I didn't even realize how tightly wound I'd been until that moment. That fear had been sitting in my stomach the entire time. But the relief didn't last long, because she sat down and told me she knew what was going on, at least from her father's side. And it wasn't simple. She told me her dad finally talked after almost a full day of silence. Apparently, the moment he saw my mom's face, he recognized her immediately. Not vaguely. Not maybe. Completely. My mom wasn't just someone he knew. She was someone connected to one of the worst periods of his life. Christina didn't dump everything on me all at once. She explained it slowly, carefully, like she was still trying to understand it herself. Her father had been furious at first, not just angry, but shaken in a way she had never seen growing up. According to her, he barely slept that night and kept pacing the hotel room. Her mom cried a lot but didn't argue with him, which apparently scared her more than the anger itself. Eventually, he told her a version of the story. Not details yet, just enough for her to understand why he reacted the way he did. Whatever happened between him and my mother happened decades ago, back in the Philippines, long before either of us existed as adults with lives in California. It involved betrayal, shame, and something that deeply affected both families. Christina said her father described it as a chapter he buried completely when he immigrated, something he never expected to face again. When he saw my mom's face at dinner, it felt to him like the past suddenly walked back into his life without warning. That's why he reacted the way he did. Not because of me. Not because of Christina. But because he panicked. Hearing that didn't make me feel better. If anything, it made things heavier. Because now the problem wasn't a misunderstanding that could be cleared up quickly. It was history, the kind that sits quietly for decades and then explodes when nobody expects it. She told me she asked her father directly if I had done something wrong. He said no. She asked if marrying me would hurt her. He couldn't answer clearly, which apparently scared her more than if he had just said yes or no. At some point during all of this, she contacted my mom herself. I didn't even know she had done that until she told me tonight. My mom answered the call, and according to Christina, she sounded like she had already been crying. My mom didn't deny knowing her father. She didn't argue or defend herself either. She just told Christina that she wanted to explain everything properly, in person, to both of us together. My mom asked her to wait. So she is. My mom and dad are flying in tomorrow morning. That part still feels surreal to say out loud. My mom almost never travels because of her health, but apparently she insisted. Christina said my dad was the one who called afterward to confirm they were coming and that my mom felt she owed us the truth face to face. When my fiancé told me that, I felt this strange mix of dread and relief. Relief because at least someone is finally going to explain what's happening. Dread because whatever it is was strong enough to break two families apart once already. I asked Christina how she felt about all of this, and she took a long time before answering. She said she doesn't know how to feel yet. All she said was that it was sad. That's the exact word she used. Sad. Not angry at my mom. Not blaming me. Just sad. She also told me something that honestly surprised me. She said she respects my mom. Even after hearing her father's side, she didn't come home furious or accusing. She said life is complicated and people make decisions when they're young that follow them forever. She wants to hear my mom's side before deciding anything about the future. So now we're waiting. And waiting feels harder than the chaos did. The apartment is quiet again, but different from before. We're both here, sitting in the same space, trying to act normal while knowing tomorrow might completely reshape how we see our families. We ordered takeout and barely touched it. At one point we both laughed at something random on TV, and the normalcy of that moment almost felt unreal. I keep looking at her and wondering how something that started with a random airplane seat assignment turned into this complicated intersection of past lives we didn't even know existed. Part of me feels guilty for showing that photo, even though logically I know I couldn't have predicted any of this. Another part of me keeps thinking that if this hadn't happened now, it would have happened later, maybe at the wedding itself, in front of hundreds of people. That would have been worse. I called my dad briefly tonight after she got home. He sounded tired but calm. He told me to get some rest and not assume the worst until everyone talks together. He didn't give hints or explanations, which tells me this is bigger than I thought. My mom hasn't called me directly since yesterday. That alone tells me how serious this is. She usually checks on me constantly, especially when she knows I'm stressed. Right now, Christina is asleep in the bedroom. I don't think she actually meant to fall asleep, exhaustion just won. Seeing her finally rest after everything makes me realize how unfair this situation is to both of us. We didn't create whatever happened decades ago, yet we're standing in the middle of it. Tomorrow morning my parents arrive. Tomorrow we finally hear the full story. And honestly, I don't know if that conversation is going to fix everything or break it completely. I just know that for the first time since that dinner, at least we're not in the dark anymore. We're not related. The wedding isn't officially cancelled yet. And somehow, despite everything, she's still here. Update 2. I didn't sleep the night before my parents arrived. Not really. Every time I closed my eyes, my brain filled in possibilities worse than the last one. By morning I felt hollowed out, like my body had run a marathon without moving. Christina woke up before me, but neither of us mentioned how tense the air felt. We moved around each other quietly, making coffee we barely drank, checking the time every few minutes like that would somehow slow it down. When my parents finally knocked, the sound felt heavier than it should have. My dad looked older than the last time I saw him, tired in a way I'd never noticed before. My mom looked fragile, not physically, emotionally. Her eyes were swollen like she'd been crying for hours. She hugged me longer than usual, and there was something apologetic in it before a single word had been spoken. Nobody knew how to start. We all sat in the living room, the same place where Christina and I usually watched movies or argued about what to eat for dinner. Now it felt like a courtroom. Christina sat beside me but slightly turned toward my mom, calm but guarded. My dad stayed quiet, almost deliberately removed, like he understood this wasn't his story to tell. My mom kept twisting her hands together. I had never seen her nervous around me before. Eventually she looked at Christina and said she was sorry, not in a vague polite way, but with the weight of someone who had carried something for decades. She said she knew Christina's father immediately when she saw his picture after the dinner. She hadn't expected to ever see him again, much less through her son's relationship. Then she started talking. The story went back more than 25 years, to when my mom was still living in the Philippines. She was young, barely out of college, living with her family. What I learned next completely changed how I understood my childhood stories about her past. Her family was abusive. Not loud, obvious abuse that outsiders would notice, but controlling and suffocating. According to her, every major decision in her life was treated like family property, where she worked, who she spoke to, who she dated. My grandfather controlled finances tightly, and my uncles reinforced whatever he decided. She described it as living inside a plan someone else had already written. At that time, Christina's father was doing well financially. He had business investments, property, and was considered stable and respectable. My mom met him through mutual acquaintances. She said he was kind to her immediately, patient and generous, and for the first time she felt treated like an individual instead of an obligation. But what she thought was a normal relationship wasn't entirely her choice. Her family pushed it hard. They believed he was the perfect match financially and socially. My mom admitted that she liked him, but she also said she felt trapped. Saying no wasn't really an option in her household. Every hesitation turned into pressure, guilt, or anger from her relatives. She described arguments where she was told she was selfish for not securing a better future for everyone. Over time, the relationship became less about two people and more about expectations placed on both of them. Christina's father, from what my mom explained, believed they were building a future together. Meanwhile, her family became increasingly involved, inserting themselves into financial matters that had nothing to do with them. That's where things turned ugly. Her relatives convinced her, and sometimes spoke directly on her behalf, about investments, shared property plans, and financial assistance. My mom admitted she went along with things she didn't fully understand because refusing meant conflict she didn't feel safe facing at the time. Money changed hands. Property agreements were discussed. Promises were made that she now says she never should have allowed. She didn't describe it as one dramatic scam, but as a slow escalation where her family leveraged the relationship for financial gain. Requests kept growing, justified as temporary help or future joint plans. Christina's father trusted her, and because of that, he trusted the situation. Eventually, he realized things weren't right. My mom's voice shook when she talked about that part. She said he confronted her, not angrily at first, but confused. By then, her family had already benefited financially in ways she couldn't undo. When the truth came out about how much involvement her relatives had behind the scenes, everything collapsed fast. He felt betrayed. And from his perspective, he had every reason to. My mom admitted she didn't defend herself well because she was ashamed and scared. Instead of standing up to her family publicly, she withdrew. Arguments exploded between both families. Accusations were thrown. What might have been resolved privately became public humiliation within their social circles. She left shortly afterward. Not just the relationship, the entire environment. She cut contact with parts of her own family and eventually immigrated, trying to start over somewhere no one knew that history. She told us she carried guilt ever since. Not because she intentionally set out to hurt him, but because she didn't stop what was happening when she still had the chance. She said she was young, afraid, and controlled by people she didn't yet know how to stand up to. Listening to this felt surreal. The version of my mother I knew growing up was gentle, conflict avoidant, almost overly cautious about money and relationships. Suddenly that made sense in a way it never had before. Christina sat very still through all of it. She didn't interrupt. She didn't accuse. She just listened, occasionally asking quiet clarifying questions. One of the hardest moments came when my mom admitted that Christina's father likely lost significant money and property connected to those arrangements. She said she never personally benefited from most of it and had cut ties with relatives afterward, but she knew that didn't erase the damage. She said she had wanted to apologize for years but never knew how to reopen something that painful. The room stayed silent for a long time after she finished. Christina eventually spoke, carefully choosing her words. She said her father described that period as one of the worst betrayals of his life. He believed he had been manipulated by someone he trusted deeply. Hearing my mom acknowledge the pressure and abuse behind it didn't erase his pain, but it changed the picture slightly. There wasn't yelling. No dramatic confrontation. Just heavy understanding settling into the space between everyone. My dad finally spoke then, explaining that he knew parts of the story but not all the details. He said my mom spent years trying to rebuild herself after leaving that situation and avoided anything that reminded her of it. What hit me the hardest was realizing both families had been living with completely different versions of the same history for decades. Christina later told me her father had always framed it as deliberate deception. Hearing my mom describe fear, coercion, and family control complicated that narrative without fully undoing it. Nobody walked away feeling good. But something shifted. Instead of anger filling the room, there was exhaustion, the kind that comes after carrying resentment too long. Christina said she needed time to talk to her parents again with this new information. My mom agreed immediately and said she didn't expect forgiveness, only the chance for honesty. After my parents left that evening, Christina and I sat quietly for a long time. The situation still isn't resolved. Her father is still hurt. My mom is still ashamed. And we're caught somewhere in the middle of a story that started long before we met on that airplane. The wedding isn't cancelled anymore, but it isn't back on either. Everything is paused while both families figure out whether decades-old wounds can coexist with a future neither of us wants to lose. I don't know what happens next.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Daily Tales Update for more such stories.